In compliance with the Open Public Meeting Law, the Delran Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting, including the time, date, and location, to be submitted for publication to the Burlington County Times, the Courier Post, and to be posted to the Delran Township Municipal Building, Board Office, and all school bulletin boards at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Will all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Candy, roll call.
Mr. Brophy?
Here.
Mr. Sharici?
Here.
Mrs. Melvin?
Here.
Mr. Lonergan?
Here.
Mr. Over? Mrs. Raffanello?
Here.
Mrs. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to table agenda questions from the public and go right to Brian's presentation, and there'll be public comments after that.
Thank you, Mr. Kidley. This evening I do have a presentation regarding the continuing work that we're doing in the district with respect to reopening and continuing that process as it relates to not only our academic programs but our co-curricular programs as well. And I'm certainly happy to have some folks here from the community, so we are going to speak about what has been the state of affairs from a public health perspective. I'm going to speak about our operational norms, and I'm going to speak about our academic programs that we have implemented at various stages throughout the course of the year, and review the intention behind each one of those junctures. And then we are going to speak about a proposal that will be put before the Board of Education. So from a public health perspective, right around a year ago, Governor Murphy acted pretty swiftly and shut down public schools through executive order. And many of his subsequent leadership decisions have been done through executive orders. So we went into a remote instruction phase at that time. We finished out the school year. And shortly, right around when the school year was concluding last year, he began the process of reopening the state. And one of the initial initiatives that his administration pushed forward when he went to reopen the state was he issued what's called guidance document to school districts across the state. And that guidance was called the Road Back, and it was essentially our marching orders as far as how to reopen the school, different options and alternatives based upon a host of factors. One of those factors certainly is your student population. We have remote learners here in Delran Township. We have on-site learners in Delran Township, and that was a big piece and a big key on how we ended up arriving at decisions. Throughout the summer, we examined public health pretty deeply and widely. The summer months were the healthiest during the pandemic, certainly. And as the pandemic has evolved from summer to now, the public health matters have had various stages of intensity, and they vary quite a bit. We were in the position and I pardon the board members who are staring at me back, but we're in a position to open for full days of instruction as we began as we came back to school in September. We did that because the public health suggested that we could. We examined public health from three levels. The first level certainly is a statewide level, and that's the level that is probably most widely promoted in the press and things along those lines. Things like transmission rates are an important data point for school districts to understand the spread of the virus. You know, we examine that. We examine cases, total case numbers. We examine hospitalizations, and you follow it from a statewide perspective. And the current state of affairs, as it relates to public health on the state level currently, is that those metrics are on the decline across the state. We also examine public health from a regional perspective. The New Jersey Department of Health has outlined 6 regions throughout the state. Delran Township is in the southwest region of New Jersey, and we focus on the southwest region when we examine what our public health is. The southwest region has had, much like the pandemic itself and the various graphs and data sets you've seen, there have been lows in the southwest region and there have been highs in the southwest region. 2 of the data points that we look at in the southwest region are what's called the case rate per 100,000 residents. And that tells you kind of how intense the cases are, how intense the public health situation is in your particular region. And in the southwest region, they started publicizing this data in October. October 17th was the first day that they issued that information out to school districts and communities and the public. And at that time, the southwest region of New Jersey, where Delran is, had 10 cases per 100,000 residents. Those case rates quickly increased to a high of 57 cases per 100,000 residents on December 10th. And that was the high for the southwest region. And since December 10th, the case rate per 100,000 residents has been declining, and it's now settled in at about 17. So, first report in the middle of October, it was 10. We had a high of 57, and now it's kind of settled in at 17. The last 2 reports, that's where it's been. We also look at the percent positivity rate for the southwest region when we examine different ways to understand the impact of the virus. We had a very low percent positivity rate in October at about 3.5%. It rose to about 15% on December 10th at its peak, and it's now settled down in the 5.5% range. And it's been there for multiple reporting periods, at least 2. But it's been a steady decline since December 10th. So when you examine the public health perspective from a little more locally on a regional basis, the public health has been improving, I'll argue, significantly over time. We also examine public health from a local perspective. And we track what's called a 7-day rolling average for the township. When we were in lockdown last spring, Delran Township did extraordinarily well because nobody was really going anywhere. So the 7-day rolling averages were like in the zeros and the ones for the most part. There were cases here, but by and large, the data was encouraging. When we opened up for our first day of school, the 7-day rolling average for Delran Township was 2.14. 7-day rolling average was 2.1. Pretty manageable for the entire township, not just the school district. That actually went down to 1 by the end of September. And then by Thanksgiving, it was all the way up to 16 cases per day in Delran Township. That was the peak. And at this point, the 7-day rolling average is settled in between 4 and 5 for Delran Township. From a public health perspective, during this time of our entire school year, the school district, I guess owned, for lack of a better word, they were able to, they were connected to 12% of the 12% of the township cases were tied back to district kids or district staff members. That has decreased over time to 8.5%. So, we've been seeing things over time become significantly more healthy from a public health perspective. And certainly that has a direct impact and correlation to the ability to facilitate in-person instruction. You guys like this? Good, right? We have my friend, Mr. Deanley, in the back, who is so happy he came tonight. So we're going to talk about operations. We're going to talk about our different schedules. You all have seen this information hundreds of times, seen it on the media, but we have done a host of things in order to facilitate in-person instruction, focus on our norms, focus on our behaviors, really tie down the operational pieces to what we do on a day-to-day basis, and we've done so very successfully. We haven't had any in-school transmission of cases. We've screened temperatures, hand washing, sanitizing, maintaining 6 feet or thereabouts. We are very focused on classroom routines, classroom rituals that do include various states at the varying schools of cleanliness and things like desk maintenance. Our hallways, particularly at the middle and high school, have one-way designations, one-way stairways. Our transportation services have followed suit accordingly in order to mitigate risk. We have procedures around lunches and snacks that are different at each school, and each family has attested to their role and responsibility with respect to public health and the ability to continue in-person instruction. So when we came back to school in September, we opened on a schedule that was 4 full days of on-site instruction per week. We have and continue to have 2 cohorts in Cocos and Delaware. They were on-site for 2 full days a week, and they were remote for 3 full days a week. We had a remote day for the whole district on Wednesday. Each Wednesday, teachers would check in virtually with students. They would also engage in professional development exercises and activities, attend to collaborative meetings with their subject area colleagues. In many cases, we would have student-based meetings, team-based meetings, and it certainly was a very productive use of time. We had lunches. Each school had a different way of feeding their kids, and we saw 72% of our students in the district enroll in our hybrid program, which they would be on site for partial weeks and learning from home partial weeks, and 27% of the students in the district were remote. Now these numbers on the planning and preparation side are important because based upon these numbers, you either have a lot of flexibility as far as how you develop your programs, or you have less flexibility on how to develop your programs. As an example, if you have a higher percentage of students that are full remote, you have a greater opportunity to be a little more innovative in your program. In Delran Township, we have 72% that are in a hybrid program, and candidly, we're very pleased about that because we believed in our ability in in-person instruction. I believe that's what we do best. So we're thrilled that our numbers, are that high. It's a point of pride for me when I speak to colleagues about what our actual on-site numbers are, because I think it speaks to the overall product that the teachers in the district and the administrators in the district have created here. We then, as I shared before, as I kicked this off, we then ran into a very difficult situation with respect to public health over time. What had happened is cases started really accelerating. The period of time between Halloween and a few weeks before Thanksgiving were very difficult and challenging from a public health perspective. You may recall the rolling 7-day average of cases at that period of time was 16, was a high of 16. And so when you spread that out across the district, it did result in a concerning kind of public health situation when it's matched up against our ability to facilitate and execute in-person instruction amidst scenarios that could include quarantine and teachers teaching remotely, like from their kitchen to our classrooms. It certainly created a significant challenge. So we made a transition from November 16th to January 15th. We went on a full remote instruction schedule. We merged the two cohorts together and we went full remote. We were on a single session schedule and we had afternoon office hours for teachers to connect in a variety of ways with kids, both academically and socially as well. At that period of time, we also brought in our self-contained special education students for on-site instruction for 4 days a week in all 4 schools. So as public health became a pressing concern, we responded with a measure that we felt was appropriate given the nature of the virus and given the nature of our responsibility on the educational side and also on the side of risk mitigation. So currently, we returned on January 19th. We returned to a resumption of on-site instruction. We reintroduced the cohort model. Okay, so Rancocas and Delaware was back in the mix again. Grades 3 through 12 had a synchronous instruction component for the at-home cohort. We had single sessions. We did not serve lunch. We continued with the office hours and check-in approach. Each cohort was on site for 2 half days with afternoon check-ins, and they were 3 days remote. Our self-contained special education continues on site. From an enrollment perspective, there's been some shifting of the enrollment stands. And each school has seen a little bit of shifting in both directions. The high school started out, 3/4 of the kids were in a hybrid program and 1/4 were remote. Now it's more like 2/3 are hybrid and 1/3 remote. So they've had an increase in the amount of remote learners since the beginning of the year. Middle school, they were 72% on-site, 27% remote to begin the year, and now they're basically at 70-30. There's been a little bit of change there, not significant. Intermediate school, 71% and 28% were hybrid and remote to start the year, and now they're at 67 and 33. Millbridge began the year 70-30, present day they're at 80-20. So we've seen more kids come back over time. At the district level, our numbers are about the same. 70-30 now, 73-27 to begin the school year. So I was speaking about the ability to do different things based upon what the population wants over time, and there really hasn't been a lot of change when you look at the whole district in itself when examining who's a hybrid learner and who's remote. We've used our facilities in very creative ways and certainly in ways that many of us never thought we would be doing. Our classrooms at the high school have 13 forward-facing students in each class. They're spaced 5 to 6 feet apart, much closer to 6 than to 5. In our gymnasium, we use that for study hall, we use it for physical education, we also use it for lunches. The auxiliary gym, we have been feeding kids lunches in there, and we also use it for study halls. The PAC, we use for study halls, and we also use it for instruction in here. Media center media center is used for study hall and instruction, and cafeteria we use for study halls and we use for lunch. The middle school, we use the cafeteria for overflow instruction when that's necessary. We also use it for lunches. Gymnasium, overflow, physical education, and lunch. We have tents that we use for lunch, both at middle and high. Mr. McHale also uses his band room for overflow instruction, his media center for instruction, and his capacity is at 13 seats in a class, spaced 5 to 6 feet apart. Intermediate school, again, we're using the cafeteria as our teaching spaces as well. The gymnasium is a faculty resource center. It's also used for instruction at the intermediate school. We use hallways and alcoves for instruction as well at the intermediate school. And the alcove piece is actually something that was used for instruction even pre-pandemic. And our seating capacity is about 13 seats in a class as well. At the intermediate school, Millbridge, we utilize 15 to 18 forward-facing students. First and second grade, about 13 to 14. Our gymnasium is used for physical therapy and instruction, and our cafeteria is used for instructional purposes and for feeding purposes. So we really kind of stretch things out quite a bit. We have tents that we're re-erecting at all 4 of our schools. Each school had 1 tent in the fall. We had to take them down by code by Thanksgiving because of local ordinances connected to the tents not being able to hold the weight of the snow on the tents. It's a good thing we took them down this year. They're going back up on April 1st. The high school has 2 tents going up, Millbridge has 2, the intermediate school has 2, and the middle school is getting 3. I am proposing the following for March 22nd. I'm proposing that we continue the cohort model. So the cohort model allows us to continue to have the spacing that we believe is important with respect to mitigating risk connected to the virus. This also resumes 4 full days of on-site instruction with lunch as we did in September. We will continue to expand our specialized population opportunities, special education, English language learners, students that are involved in our intervention and referral services program, and who have other accommodations. I'm also proposing a full-day merged cohort kindergarten, which means that our kindergarten program will not be an alternate, will not be a hybrid where you're home some days and you're at school other days. They would be in every day that school is open. The kindergarten rooms are in the process of a redecorating phase, shall we say, where we are taking out basically everything that isn't nailed down to the wall or to the floor, and we are replacing those rooms predominantly with student desks. So I don't know the last time some of you have been in kindergarten, but there's a lot that goes into those rooms from a furniture perspective that's connected to the program that is being removed and placed into storage. So our youngest learners can have a merged cohort model. It's important to note that this year our enrollment in kindergarten has declined approximately 25% due to parent choice of where they would like to or how they would like to educate their child. And as a parent of a very young child at home, I completely appreciate those discussions and decisions that families have made with respect to their child's schooling. So we had an opportunity to take advantage of in kindergarten because of an enrollment decline this year. I do expect that to go back up, but this year it's, in my view, connected to the pandemic. And in first and second grade, I'm proposing to expand our streaming out of instruction for our first and second grade learners that are learning virtually at home. Similarly, I am also recommending that when we return from spring break, that we transition into an on-site instructional model each Wednesday by utilizing an alternating cohort approach. So one week it will be Delaware will be on site and Rancocas will be home, and the next week Rancocas will be on site and Delaware would be home. The work that I do with the board and they do with me is very much a partnership. I am the superintendent of the school district. I'm what they call the chief school administrator. I make recommendations to the board. The board has an opportunity to vet them out. The board has an opportunity to consider them. And we engage in that process, whether it's connected to our academic program or if it's connected to extracurricular appointments or facility enhancements or anything that comes before the board for them to approve is essentially a culmination of a relationship between me and them and the board and the entire administration and entire staff here. Throughout this process, I have asked the board to approve what's called a restart and recovery plan. And that is something that is required by the Department of Education to have a plan that outlines your operational procedures. That is a plan that outlines your instructional approaches. That is a plan that really addresses every single piece of education in a pandemic. It is a process that always seems to be in flux. Like, see how the pandemic changes from a public health perspective. It's always kind of something that we're working on. I'm blessed and honored to be able to work with this board because of their ability to examine challenges that come before the district and issues and decisions from a global lens and a global perspective. So it's a healthy relationship, very targeted and focused on students and kids and being able to balance their responsibility around helping us to establish an educational program and also helping us manage things like fiscal integrity as well. So one of the things that I'm going to ask the board to consider is to authorize me to revise some components of the Restart and Recovery Plan, many of which I discussed earlier this evening. An elimination of the Wednesday remote day, effective April 12th. An institution of an alternating cohort attendance model on Wednesday. Consolidation of a kindergarten cohort into one. An increase in plexiglass barriers for kindergarten at each student desk. Expansion of special education, English language learner, and academically at-risk students for every day that the district is open. And increasing the number of outdoor tents that the district has at its disposal to facilitate lunches, outdoor instruction, and anything that may come to the attention of the school principals and individual schools. I'm also asking them to revise the on-site cohort attendance schedule. That maintains Delaware's on Monday and Thursday, and it maintains rain focus on Tuesday and Friday, and it delineates what days members from each cohort would attend on-site instruction. I'm also asking them to approve single sessions 4 days throughout the spring in order to help facilitate things that are typically in our schedule in a normalized 5-day work week year. Those days are called PC PEP days, where there are early closings for things like collaborative planning, staff development, and a variety of things that that we afford teachers throughout the course of the year. So I am asking them to consider that for approval as well in this phase of our plan. So, Mr. Kidley, I would defer to you and the board if any board members have a particular question about the items that I presented.
Okay. Mary?
I really don't have a question. I just want to thank you for all your hard work. I don't think there's any one of us up here that don't want our kids back to school. So we really appreciate all you do, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm right there with Mary. I thank you, Dr. Brochel, for considering what we can do with our space availability here, and I'm in agreement, with some of the things that Mary said in terms of we all want our students back in school, and we're going to work to get them there. It may be a slow process, but whatever we have to do, that's what we're going to do. So I appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. Thank you.
In addition to echoing the comments, I just want to say just to the group out in the audience that as you've heard Dr. Brochel speak and the amount of interaction that we have with Dr. Brochel and with the board between our meetings, our committee meetings, we're meeting quite consistently and quite frequently throughout the course of a month. And an incredible amount of time has been spent in thinking about this and discussing things. And as you can well tell, with the rules that have to be followed and with the procedures and the policies, it's taken an enormous effort to get us to where we are. So I think we're heading in the right direction on the way back. And correct, everybody wants to get back to school full time. But in light of where we are populationally throughout the state, throughout the country, I think we're moving in the right direction. And from a timing perspective, it seems to be the method that we have to use to get us back to where we need to be eventually. Thank you.
Brian, I just want to say that I think this is a reasonable approach and a balanced approach, given the fact that we have to take into consideration two serious issues, which is quality instruction and compare that with public health and public safety. And I particularly like the buffer that was included to adjust, if necessary, any potential increase in cases that are or may be tied to lunches or spring break. It gives you and your team an opportunity to adjust during that period. So I think this is a reasonable approach and gives us pressure relief valves if there are some situations where we need to make adjustments based on the data that you're getting from the health department in regional areas, Burlington County and Delran specifically. So given the fact that I think it's our collective desire to return kids, as many kids as possible into our buildings for as many days as possible, but also making sure that approach is in the best interest of everyone's health.
I just want to say thank you, like everybody else. This is a good starting plan, given the parameters that have been given from the state. And I know we are continually looking at that and pressuring from our end, the state and local legislators, to help us to bring more kids back. And I want to thank the community for the pressure that they've been putting on as well, by emailing and the governor's office. We hope it's helping. We hope they're listening to the parents. And like I said, this is just a start. So this is a good plan for where we're at right now.
I just want to say thank you. I think this is a fair and balanced and equitable approach, and it's getting kids back into school full days, which I think we all want. Thank you.
I appreciate the comments. One thing that I want to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would. First of all, I'd like to genuinely thank everybody who's sitting in this building. It shows your interest, your concern, about your children's education, that you're all here. So I genuinely thank you for attending. Second of all, as you've seen, that this comprehensive plan has involved a lot of people. And a lot of people that aren't mentioned in this are the staff, aides, supervisors, principals. All of those people had input, and they're working as hard as possible under a no game plan layout. There hasn't been a pathway to go through this, and I think those efforts sometimes get overshadowed because, well, you know, my job, I can work from home and do it at home. That's fine. But this is a little different because, frankly, it's about the most important thing to you people in this room, your kids. And I want you to recognize that, I'd like you to recognize, let me rephrase that you as a community realize how important your students are to the district and to all the people who work in the buildings here. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. Keeley, I'd like to develop a point that you brought up, and it is critical that I share this out with the community, that throughout the pandemic, going back to March, the teachers have, and the entire professional staff has adjusted and shifted more times than they really ever imagined. Their passion and their dedication to the kids that they serve is absolutely inspiring. And just understand that every time this pandemic evolves and warrants a shift, it's a seismic shift on their end. And I think over time, the narrative around education doesn't quite capture the everyday heroes that they are. And I mean that sincerely. They're a passionate group. They're a loyal group. They absolutely bleed yellow and brown and constantly talk to me and others about how they would like to impact your children and their students through instruction. I believe the best thing that we do is on-site instruction, and I believe deeply in that with them. And so it's important that I reinforce for the public and certainly the board just the power that they have really in the process of education, and how deeply I care for them. So it's I would much like to see the narrative around all of education improve. I believe that we're taking a phased-in, measured approach in order to facilitate, our next steps. And this plan here before the board is where we are right now. So that does conclude my presentation to the board. I'll defer to Mr. Kidley. I do have a slide up here for public questions. The board also has an opportunity for public comment in their agenda as well. So I'll defer to Mr. Kidley on how he would like to conduct that part of the meeting.
Okay. While trying not to split hairs, under the agenda, we can have genuine questions about the plan. And in public comments, you can express opinions, but in the first part, we'd like actual comment or actual questions, nuts and bolts, facts, that kind of thing. And then our BA Candy has a statement from the student body she's going to read, and then we'll go into public comments. Okay? So that being said, are there any questions on the plan, nuts and bolts wise, factual wise? Okay, if you would stand and give your name, please. Thank you.
I have a daughter in high school, and I'm just wondering the days when the cohorts are home, learning virtually, are they going to be logging in and seeing what classes live? Are they going to be doing remote but not live? Synchronous instruction, I'm just wondering what the days and all that is like.
It's a live feed into the classroom.
Okay, so that's what they're doing now for a whole day.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on questions? Yes, please. I'll get everybody. I'll go ahead.
My name is Krista Small, I'm a freshman here at Elmwood. Has there been thought around once the start of April 12th? By the way, I think it's a great event. Thank you very much. Is there a time frame when you say, okay, after 4 weeks, if all is good, it would change again to be more? Or is this pretty much roll of that for the rest of the year, which isn't that long?
So it's a very, very good question. And Mr. Finkel will tell you that it's a topic that I discuss with him often. And it's complex because the way the schedule at the high school in particular worked out, the cohorts are imbalanced, right? And we were actually going through class by class, period by period, room by room. How many kids are assigned? How many seats are open? Is there an opportunity, as an example, to take a fraction of students that are at home that day and invite them in? It does get tricky and complex. Probably the biggest challenge we have is, and I guess it's a great problem to have, where we have such a high population of on-site learners. So it just kind of, it puts a constraint on it. So what I can tell you, and for the board, is that we are constantly examining all 4 schools, constantly examining our load sizes in each room, and examining if there are opportunities for something that you are suggesting. We don't have any timeline to announce at this time. We continue to adhere to the CDC guidance, and we continue to be faithful to the load capacity there. But what you're asking is an hourly phone call, text message, and email to really examine things. There are some buildings that, in our view, are really maxed to full capacity. Predominantly the intermediate school is probably the least likely to be in any situation that could have an expansion. There's a little more flexibility at middle and high, but again, as an example, it wouldn't guarantee, like if you're an off-cohort student and you come in, it wouldn't guarantee we can even fit you in the room. You would be kind of in an overflow space. So, just from a facility and infrastructure perspective, each school has very unique, very particular challenges that make it difficult to just say from a district level, yeah, we're gonna just flip the light switch. But please understand that we do examine this, and I actually report this information out every meeting. We talk about all the different pressure points, so it's a constant.
Somebody, yes, please.
Hi, I'm Kim Alice. I'm a mom of a daughter in high school and a daughter in middle school. Refer to the full-day transition for those cohorts. Sure, curious, the Wednesdays when the kids go back, that will also be a full day?
Yes.
Okay. And then, if you could just explain, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's just curious, why the delay to April 12th for that day to go back full day as well?
Sure. So we are reintroducing a Wednesday. I feel strongly about the buffer because there are some considerations on the staff side that I feel strongly about that need to be addressed at all 4 schools. So it gives us some breathing room, and it gives us a little bit of a buffer prior to implementing. And I felt strongly that I wanted to have that in case there were things that needed to be worked out. You have to understand as well that we're going to be reintegrating and reintroducing different activities, different operational norms that will also take some time to readjust to.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
Well, I thought it was attainable. I thought that candidly we had proven that we had the ability to do it once, and I did view it as being able to do it again. So I did feel like that date was attainable to start first with a 4-day phase-in. We haven't considered moving that for market period alignment purposes, no.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Ina Markey, I have a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. Similar question on the buffer and the start date. Some concern with the March 22nd date, realize that you guys have competing interests, and my kindergartner is fully removed. Hadn't planned on sending her back after after spring break, and adjusting for the March 22nd date. I wasn't sure what the thinking was there, and wanted to confirm that I think some of the kindergarten folks were particularly fully removed, whether they're going to be able to move their kids back in.
Sure, Mrs. Lowe will be in touch with you. I know she's very eager to do that, and you may be able to grab her on your way out, or vice versa, specifically about those, about that situation.
Yeah, and I'd just like to put out there for the working parents that it's a little bit tough on that time period. Again, knowing you guys have competing interests, I want to thank the board for kind of the thankless task that you've had in the past year. But I would ask moving forward that in terms for working parents and those the youngest kids that have been scrapping together to take care of many cases this year, that is, a difference in whatever we expected for the spring break. I have one other question, if I could, about the plan, particularly with regard to quarantine. I think to your point earlier that the quarantines were from community spread, low mid-school transition, consistent with the rest of the state. There was new Department of Health guidance put out in January, particularly page 17 of that guidance that talks about how to define close contacts. And they were pretty clear that close contacts should be the only time that we're quarantining, and close contacts should rarely be happening if we're doing the social distancing, which it seems like we are doing a great task at. So my question is whether or not the school district plan has looked at defining close contacts and then what requires a quarantine, so that we don't have the same issues when we go back more fully and having so many quarantines that almost render it impossible to stay in the cohorts in the same issues.
Yes, I can speak to that. And I appreciate that you read all of those pages of the Department of Health guidance.
Wow.
Yeah, you got to 17. So we do coordinate our quarantines with the Department of Health. There's an office in Mount Holly that we connect with. You have elementary kids. Elementary kids they work under a slightly different quarantining paradigm that is not expressly stated in that guidance. And I didn't really know until September. Once I ran into our first situation at the intermediate school. So basically what the health department is saying is, at the elementary level, even if you're doing everything perfectly and correctly, and in their opinion we were, those kids are still subject to quarantine because of the duration of time that they're together. If you examine that against a middle school and a high school kid, they're with each other for 40 or so minutes and they're getting up and they're going to the next class. So just that level of movement has resulted in less full class quarantines at middle and high in comparison to intermediate. And I think overall, intermediate has taken the brunt of the full class quarantines in comparison to the rest of the district. So long answer, but it's connected to the amount of time that they're together. And I'll agree with you because I think what you're saying is it's frustrating to you, and it is a frustrating point, when we interact with the health department as well. But that's the consistent justification that they have provided regarding the quarantine. However, you also asked me a secondary question that I haven't forgotten about, and that question was, is the district examining the length of quarantine, right? So when that guidance came out in January, we were in the orange code of public health. So we stuck with a 14-day quarantine. The Department of Health, regardless of their color coding of the region, is suggesting a 14-day quarantine whenever possible. I can share with you that there are points that what you're bringing up that are valid that we have kicked around, and we will continue to examine, particularly quarantine length, because it does present a problem at the elementary level. So more information to come on that.
Yes, please.
Another question, back on the quarantine thing. With spring breaks coming up, if your kids are in hybrid, I suppose it's for any of the schools, and you choose to travel or, you are potentially exposed or whatever the case may be, and you have to quarantine, and or if a child is sick that's on hybrid, can they still sign on to remove an account towards their being present with them?
Yes. So if a child needs to quarantine, they can sign on for remote. You bring up an interesting point, and it is a very popular question at the moment regarding the travel restrictions. Delran happens to utilize the second week of what districts typically use as spring break. Some take the week before Easter, some take the week after. We're in the second week. I have been holding off announcing the travel implications, particularly because I am holding out hope, and I know that hope isn't a strategy, but I am holding out hope that the health department will offer some revisions. My good friend, Ms. Kristoff, up here this evening, is a native Massachusetts resident. She did tell me, as an example, that Massachusetts lifted all of its travel restrictions. And I would hope that something like that is coming our way. There's also some conflicted guidance as it relates to a fully vaccinated person that we're asking for clarity on as well. So I'm waiting about 7 days to put that information out as well. But if you do travel, certainly you would have that ability.
In the back.
Just asking if kids do go back to school, I'm assuming they're starting lunch again, and Are you saying that everybody will be comfortable taking off the mask, eating, sitting close to each other as we do the other?
So if I understand your question correctly, it's a question about lunch, and we will continue to institute the spacing protocols, in our lunches. At the high schools particularly, we have picnic tables outside, tents outside, that we'll still be able to utilize for lunches. We're not giving up the importance of spacing and public health with our resumption of full day instruction.
You're protected now because you're wearing masks in school, but if you're sitting at table, everybody's taking off their mask, so there's 100 kids in a certain area, everybody has a mask on. Isn't that, shouldn't we be worried about that?
So let me speak to lunch, particularly at middle and high school level. What they do is, so number one is you have to balance manageable risk, right, in comparison with full day instruction. If there is a scenario where there's a COVID positive individual in the cafeteria, what the health department typically does, assuming that the students are spaced 6 feet apart, which they will be, they will basically take the child that's positive and then like the diamond of kids around the child. And they would be subject to quarantine. I don't know off the top of my head how many cafeteria-based quarantines occurred in the fall, but in comparison to our overall number of cases at the middle and high school, from a percentage perspective, it's low. But you hit on an important point that when you are feeding people, there is some increased risk by mask removal. In our experience in the fall, as far as not having in-school transmission, etc., and really focusing on the protocols, I do believe that we were successful. But in full candor, you do highlight an area that's important to know.
Anyone else? Okay, Candy, you have a statement to read?
Yes, I do. Hello, everyone. The statement is on behalf of the Senior Student Council and the students.
Can't hear me.
You can
Can't hear me.
Can you hear me now?
That I can, but the crowd. people
They
can't.
can't hear me?
No.
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. The statement is on behalf of the Senior Student Council and the students who signed the petition that was sent to you earlier. The reason we felt it necessary to do so because a large number of students at the school have expressed negative feelings and concerns about the schedule change that is being ruled on tonight. Said schedule change would be full day both in person and online. It would also make Wednesday another full day instead of a check-in, with one cohort attending in person and one attending online. We, the student body, would like to express why we feel this new schedule would not be beneficial for the students specifically. The first and most blatantly concerning issue is the amount of time this schedule would force us to spend on our computers. With the current schedule, each student is spending at least 10.5 hours in front of the computer each week, not counting extra help. Time spent in person school, on the computer, and homework. With the new schedule, this number would become up to 19 hours a week, depending on whether Wednesday is an online day or not. This number would be almost doubled for fully online students. Such an increase in a word is alarming. It is a known fact that sitting in front of a computer for an extended period of time comes with a number of physical, side effects such as eye strain, headaches, trouble focusing, back and shoulder pain, dry eyes, etc. But much more concerning is that it can be extremely detrimental to mental health. There have been many connections drawn between excessive screen time and increased mental health problems, including a 2017 study that concluded that people who use their computer for more than 6 hours a day were more likely to experience moderate to severe depression. In the current schedule, online days are 5 hours. In the new schedule, they are 7. In addition to this, many students have complained of trouble focusing on lessons during online days, simply due to the nature of the class not being interactive, social, or in person. Will increasing the instruction time really be a good idea if the students are unable to take full advantage of it? Circling back to the mental health, I think that we can all agree that coronavirus and the restrictions that come with it had a detrimental effect on everyone in one way or another. And according to the study by the National Institute of Health, adolescents have been hit even harder than other age groups. Due to the adolescent brains being not fully developed, they are more susceptible to mental trauma, and higher rates of anxiety, depression, and PTSD-like symptoms were identified among this age group after the pandemic hit. The study makes note that for a lot of students, school during the pandemic has increased these issues, whether it be from lack of peer interaction, a heavy workload, not getting outside, or difficulty learning online. Many students feel that a lot of their stress and anxiety stems from school. While in normal year, we would have social connection, extracurriculars, and sports to help keep us motivated. We have lost these lifelines, instead of left with only a dark room and a bright laptop screen to keep on us company. School can seem lonely and all-consumably like this. And a lot of us have been feeling the strain in our bodies and minds. The study recommends that accommodations be made and support be offered for the increased mental distress experienced by adolescents. So when they struggle just to get out of bed and brush their teeth in the morning, is increasing the school day really a good idea for a bunch of kids barely scraping by, still adjusting to the disconnect and spending their formative years in the shadow of the worst global crisis of the 21st century? Nothing about this is normal. What was normal isn't anymore. So why in the midst of abnormalcy is going back to normal? The top priority, instead of changing to fit our current circumstances, instead of attempting to return to normal school, we as the student body suggest the focus be more on helping everyone adjust to online learning and taking into account the new struggles that we all face. We believe that the current schedule caters more to these needs than the new one does, and hope you take in consideration keeping it or at least compromising between the two. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Candy. Okay, now is the section where I spoke of earlier about public comments in general. Anybody? You in the front first. Yes, you. I'm sorry.
Hi everyone, my name is Drew Newman. I'm a senior in Maryland. And I just want to thank Claire Flynn. She's the one who wrote that. She's in the junior class, so I just want to thank so thank you, Claire, for writing that. She might forget it. But I wrote a few things down, so I want to share. So I've already discussed a lot of my concerns with Dr. Virgil here, and I'm grateful he responded to me very quickly so that email this morning, and I have a response, and we're going to have some meetings with my administrator for ethics school to probably change it and suggest some new things with this system. So I just wanted to say something on behalf of my class and the student body. So I started that petition, mentioned in that speech, and discuss public health at the next meeting. And public health, I also include mental. The issue of mental health is on the rise right now. And the pandemic has brought many, many stresses into our lives. While this is our new reality, I feel we need to minimize the amount of time at our places. This amount of technology is proven to lead to levels of anxiety, depression, and other reasons. So, right now, my kids and I are struggling to be engaged in this online meeting. None of us have done it before, the teachers have done it before, but we are struggling. And we've made it through this far, but we're still struggling. And so, I'm a hybrid student, but I still have trouble looking at my computer screen for 6 hours a day. And I plan, as of right now, to remain hybrid with this new schedule. So that would be 8 hours a day. And I know this is none of your guys' fault. You did not start this COVID pandemic. But I do just want to say how much that impacts my mental health and how I feel. So, it's true, this 8 hours will only make this situation more uncomfortable and more difficult. And this is not including the time spent on homework, office hours, extra help, etc. So, I know there are only so many options here, but I feel as though minimizing this time is best to optimize our life. I don't want to keep you here all night, but I want to address one more point, and that is the senior class. So as president, I'm representing this tonight. And I just want to say I have not seen my class in full since March 13th of 2020. Nobody's fault. This is crazy to think about. So this is unfortunate and frankly present, but I know it is, again, partially related. However, I would like to maximize our chances to see our class of 2021 in full when we walk across that stage in June. That's what we did. So with spring break around the corner, it is almost inevitable that we school lives. We travel, and that's the inevitable. And you take control of it, what we're going to do, and it influences the return. I'm nervous that with this schedule, with increased time inside the building and less masking inside, lunches, we will be putting our students at risk. And let me just say, I'm going to go back to normal, just as pretty much all of you, and all the students in our school. You know, I am seeing the faces of my classmates, I'm seeing the faces of my teachers, and it's reality, again, this is what we have. But my point is, the schedule will be increasing our risk. It will be putting in jeopardy, more than it already is, final celebratory events of our senior year. Remind you, we have not had a homecoming. We had a makeshift senior cafe in the beginning of the year that we threw at the last minute. And we made the best of it. But let me just tell you, we have our senior Christmas, our prom, and our graduation. Those are the last 3 events of our year that we get to come together and commemorate our senior year.
I don't mean to legitimately cut you off, but public comments limited to 4 minutes a person.
Oh, I'm really
So,
sorry.
You're good. No, that's fine. You made some great points. I just wanted to let you know.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Moral of the story. I just think this makes me more harm than good. And while it sounds like there's already this team, I just feel obligated to speak on behalf of my class as a president. My personal concerns, but also very grateful, very thankful for all of you and your hard work, especially one for Rachel, who I have first with myself. But again, this is time to be tyrannical. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Drew, just for the benefit of the board, I want to thank you for your comments. I also want to thank you for interacting, so well and kind of capturing the lens, because that's really important. I have 2 senior girls that I live with at home. They don't always talk to me, but we live together. And I have discussed with Mr. Finkel for the better part of the year, certainly the class of 2020, but also the class of 2021, about how, that was really the class that the pandemic was hitting. And from early fall, my words with Dan is, Mr. Finkel, I'm sorry, we need to make sure that this senior class gets as much as we can possibly get back. You highlighted some really important events that are coming up. And what I can share with you is I'm looking forward to meeting with you and Mr. Finkel and your team to discuss that. Because our goal is to make sure, and I think you have the exact goal, to make sure that every single person in the class has the ability to participate. So you kind of bring in some important public health matters for us to balance, but I'm looking forward to continuing the productive dialogue that we've had, and I want to note it for the board how solution-focused Ms. Hamlin has been.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, Sue, the woman right behind you has first, so go ahead. I can't see very well. Okay. Hi. Sure. Thank you.
So if we could connect at the end of the meeting, I was just having a hard time hearing some of those points, specifically with respect to the kindergarten situation. But if we could connect definitely with Mrs. Lowe and myself after the meeting, that'd be great.
Sue?
Larry, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Brocho's board and the staff that are here. As you know, it has been an understatement saying how difficult this year has been. It's tough watching my daughter as a senior parent this past senior year. Drew touched on most of the points, so I don't want to go over that. I'm seeing my daughter smile for the first time in months due to the fact that prom is in reach and the senior trip. So I also agree that the schedule should remain the same. And because I'm concerned about the flares of COVID spread in lunches, they are 6 feet apart, but they are sitting there with the masks off and they are trying to talk and have some kind of social life. But I am concerned about that as well, just because if they have to quarantine one more time and miss this opportunity to make any memories that that they haven't had all year. I mean, this is their moment, so I just want to voice my opinion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we're closing public comments. Okay, next is, on the agenda is, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the 2021 school calendar to reflect single sessions K-12 staff articulation for collaborative instructional planning of April 22, May 4, May 20, and June 1. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Yes. Opposed? Abstained? So passes. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve to revise the 2021 on-site cohort attendance schedule. The Delaware cohort will be Monday, Thursday, and April 21, May 5, May 19, June 2, and June 16. Rancocas will be Tuesday, Friday, and April 14, 28, May 12, May 26, and June 9th. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Abstained? So passes. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve to revise and resubmit the Restart and Recovery Plan to the New Jersey Department of Education for a review with the following revisions. And those are the ones that are referenced in Brian's presentation. Can I have a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Abstained? So passes. Okay, next is a motion to adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes? No? Abstained? So passes. Thank you. We appreciate your attendance. Thank you very much for your interest in coming in.